50 bullets in broad daylight. A 13-month-old baby in the backseat. What's the purpose of shooting at a car when you know there's a child in the car? Her godfather asked. These animals have no value on life. But the real question is, who are they trying to kill? Just after 1:25 in the afternoon, on a busy Chicago street, a white sedan became a firing range. Witnesses say multiple gunmen stepped out and opened fire, unloading round after round into a parked car. More than 50 shots. Not in the middle of the night. Not on an empty road. In broad daylight. Inside that vehicle was 26-year-old Gabryel Gina Ayres. In the passenger area, her 13-month-old baby. In the driver's seat, the child's father. When the gunfire stopped, the car rolled forward and crashed. Gabryel was gone. The child survived without a scratch. The father lived, wounded, but alive. This wasn't random. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This looked like a targeted ambush. And there's a question investigators haven't publicly answered. Was Gabryel the intended target, or was someone else in that car the real objective? Because firing over 50 rounds sends a message. It suggests intent. It suggests rage. It suggests someone wanted to make absolutely certain their target did not walk away. Yet one person did. And that changes everything. Before we break this down, tell me in the comments. Do you believe this was a direct hit on Gabryel, or was she caught in something meant for someone else? And if you're watching from Chicago or anywhere else in the country, let me know where you're tuning in from. This case raises questions that still don't have answers. Welcome to Dark Trace Crime Stories. If you believe every detail tells a story, you're in the right place. Here we don't stop at headlines. We follow the trail all the way through. Subscribe, because this case is far from simple.
From all indications, there were multiple shooters who fired dozens of shots, perhaps more than 50. Remarkably, all of those bullets missed a baby who was sitting in the car that was targeted.
Investigators remained at the scene well after nightfall at this corner littered with shell casings, where somehow a baby in this bullet-riddled car emerged unscathed.
What's the purpose of shooting at a car when you know there's a child in the car? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it could be a lot of other people who's lost their life here today.
Kirk Bell.
Gabryel Ayres was simply a 26-year-old mother raising her baby in Chicago. She was someone's daughter, someone's goddaughter. Most importantly, she was a mother to a little boy who had just turned 13 months old. At that age, every day is new. First words are forming. First steady steps are being attempted. Life revolves around bottles, naps, and the small victories that only parents fully understand. Friends say Gabryel was protective of her child, the kind of young mother who made sure her baby was close, safe, and accounted for. That's what makes February 4th so difficult to process. Gabryel was in a relationship with the father of her child, a 27-year-old man who was with her in the car that afternoon. Like many young couples, they were navigating parenthood together, balancing responsibilities, managing daily stress, and raising a toddler in a city that has seen its share of violence. But nothing publicly indicated that she was expecting to become a target. Community members later described her as outspoken. She had a presence. She wasn't invisible in her neighborhood. And in today's world, that presence often extends online. Like many people in their 20s, parts of life play out on social media. Opinions shared, jokes posted, disagreements aired. Sometimes those interactions remain digital. Other times, they bleed into real-world tension. Investigators have examined whether prior disputes may have played a role in what happened. There were reports of online exchanges months earlier that some believe may have escalated conflict. Authorities have not confirmed a direct connection publicly, but the possibility has become part of the conversation surrounding her death. Still, it's important to pause here. She was 26. She had a 1-year-old who depended on her completely. Her godfather, Kirk Bell, would later speak publicly, expressing anger and disbelief that anyone could fire into a vehicle knowing a child was inside. His grief wasn't abstract. It was personal. And that's the part that often gets lost in large shooting investigations. the everyday life that existed before the violence. On February 4th, Gabryel wasn't engaged in a confrontation. She wasn't in the middle of an argument on the street. She was sitting in a car in the early afternoon with her child and her partner. It was broad daylight. The father of her child survived the attack. That fact alone has fueled one of the central questions in this case. Who was the intended target? But regardless of motive, the outcome is the same for Gabryel's family. Her child will grow up knowing his mother through stories, photographs, and news reports. And in the neighborhood where this happened, her name now carries a different weight, not just as a young woman who lived there, but as a reminder of how quickly violence can rewrite a future. February 4th, 2026, around 1:25 in the afternoon. The neighborhood of Auburn Gresham was moving through a normal weekday. Traffic passed through the 7900 block of South May Street. People were outside. It was broad daylight and nothing feels out of place. A white sedan sat parked along the street. Inside were three people: 26-year-old Gabryel Gina Ayres, her 13-month-old baby, and the child's 27-year-old father. Then it happened. Witnesses later reported seeing multiple individuals approach the area. They were masked. They were not described as arguing. There was no visible confrontation beforehand. According to police, the gunman opened fire on the parked vehicle. Not a few scattered shots. A barrage. Authorities would later confirm that more than 50 rounds were fired into that car. Long guns were used, weapons capable of sustained fire and high-velocity damage. This wasn't someone firing blindly from a distance and fleeing. This was concentrated, overwhelming gunfire directed at a single vehicle. The sound alone would have been deafening. Rapid bursts, metal piercing metal, glass shattering, neighbors dropping to the ground, people running for cover. Inside the sedan, there was nowhere to go. Bullets tore through doors, windows, and body panels. The vehicle absorbed round after round. In seconds, the windshield would have fractured, side windows blown out, the interior filled with flying debris. At some point during the gunfire, the vehicle lurched forward. Whether from impact, instinct, or loss of control, the sedan rolled and struck another van nearby before coming to a stop. And then silence. The shooters fled. When first responders arrived, the damage was extensive. The white sedan was riddled with bullet holes. The aftermath made one thing clear. Whoever pulled those triggers did not fire casually. They fired to ensure destruction. Gabryel Gina Ayres was pronounced dead. The father of her child had been shot multiple times, but survived. He was transported to the hospital in serious condition. And then there was the baby, strapped in the back seat, amid shattered glass and bullet-ripped metal. The 13-month-old child was found alive, physically unharmed. More than 50 rounds fired into that vehicle, and not one struck him. It's a detail that almost defies logic. The randomness of bullets colliding with chance. The narrow space between life and death measured in inches. Police secured the scene. Evidence markers were placed across the pavement. Shell casings littered the roadway. Investigators canvassed the area for witnesses and potential leads. At this stage, authorities confirmed key details: multiple gunmen, a targeted vehicle, long guns, and a volume of fire that suggested intent rather than impulse. What they did not immediately confirm was motive. There was no report of robbery, no indication of a carjacking attempt, no exchange of gunfire from inside the sedan. Everything pointed toward a one-sided attack, an ambush. The fact that it occurred in broad daylight raises its own questions. Carrying out a shooting of that magnitude in the early afternoon signals a level of boldness or desperation that stands apart from many nighttime incidents. It suggests the attackers were either confident they could escape or unconcerned with witnesses. And witnesses were there. Residents described hearing rapid gunfire that seemed to go on and on. Some initially thought it was construction noise, until the pattern became unmistakable. By the time the scene was cleared, more than 50 spent shell casings had been recovered. The white sedan was no longer just a vehicle. It was physical proof of how far someone was willing to go. The baby was later reunited with family members. The father began recovery, But Gabryel did not leave that street alive. Investigators began working through early leads, examining possible connections and prior conflicts. At the time of the shooting, no suspects were immediately taken into custody. Police indicated the attack appeared targeted, but stopped short of publicly naming who they believed was the intended victim. That uncertainty is what reshapes this case. If someone unloads over 50 rounds into a car, they are not hoping for chance. They are attempting certainty. Yet the intended outcome may not have unfolded exactly as planned. Which brings us to the question that continues to linger. Do you believe this was random or planned? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because what we examine next may shift how you see this entire case. As investigators continued gathering information, attention began turning toward possible prior tensions, and whether this attack was connected to something that happened long before the first shot was fired that afternoon.
It's a miracle that that baby was not shot. It's a miracle.
St. Sabina Church is around the block from where the gunfire erupted, and the church's food pantry is on that corner. People inside hiding in a back room, and after the gunfire, emerged to help the victims.
So they saw, the young man and the woman shot up in the car as they were trying to get the baby out. But they gave the baby immediately to the police, and the policewoman took it in her car and was holding it.
They need to clean this city up. They need to. This gangs and the shooting and the killing is just unbelievable.
Gabryel Ayres' mother tells me her daughter worked as a hairstylist and was training to be a letter carrier. Police have not offered a motive for the shooting.
When more than 50 rounds are fired into a parked car, investigators don't start by asking if it was intentional. They ask who it was meant for. From the beginning, Chicago police indicated the shooting appeared targeted. That single word carries weight. It suggests the gunmen weren't driving randomly, looking for opportunity. It suggests they arrived knowing exactly which vehicle they were approaching. But it does not answer the central question. Was Gabryel Gina Ayres the intended target? Or was the man in the driver's seat the focus of that attack? The father of her child survived, despite being shot. That fact has fueled widespread speculation. In many targeted shootings, the individual who lives becomes the center of scrutiny. Was he known to the shooters? Did he have prior conflicts? Was there a history investigators were already aware of? Authorities have not publicly named him as a suspect in anything connected to the ambush. They have not stated he was the target. They have also not ruled it out. That silence leaves space, and in high-profile cases, space gets filled quickly. In the days following the shooting, conversations across the community began pointing toward possible prior tensions. Reports surfaced that months earlier, there had been online exchanges involving Gabryel that some believed may have contributed to conflict. According to widely circulated accounts, a social media post from late 2025 allegedly referenced or mocked a deceased individual connected to others in the neighborhood. Law enforcement has not officially confirmed that any specific post triggered the shooting, but investigators have acknowledged examining digital activity as part of their review. In today's world, online disputes don't always stay online. What begins as a comment can turn into a threat. What begins as a public disagreement can escalate into something personal. And when reputations, grief, and pride intersect, particularly in communities already struggling with violence, consequences can move beyond screens. Still, it's critical to separate verified information from speculation. Police have not announced that the shooting was gang-related. They have not publicly identified a motive. They have not confirmed retaliation. And as of the latest updates, no arrests have been made. That absence of answers intensifies the unease. Witnesses reported seeing multiple masked gunmen. Some accounts mentioned a red vehicle believed to have been used to flee the scene. Authorities have not released a formal description beyond acknowledging they are reviewing evidence and leads. Whether that red vehicle is central to the investigation or simply one of many tips remains unclear. What is clear is the level of coordination implied by the attack. Multiple individuals, long guns, a daytime approach, a rapid exit. That suggests planning, and planning suggests familiarity with the target's movements, the vehicle, or the location. If Gabryel was the intended victim, the motive remains undefined publicly. There have been no confirmed reports that she was under active threat from law enforcement records released so far. No restraining orders reported. No public warnings issued before the attack. If the father was the intended target, the volume of fire may indicate an attempt to eliminate him completely. Yet he survived. There is also the possibility that both were intended targets. In targeted shootings, overkill, an excessive number of rounds often signals anger, retaliation, or a message meant to resonate beyond the immediate victims. Firing more than 50 rounds into a car in the middle of the day sends a statement, whether intended for one person or multiple. Community members have voiced frustration over the lack of arrests. Vigils were held. Family members demanded answers. The image of a baby sitting unharmed in the back seat while his mother was killed has become one of the defining elements of this case. But unanswered questions remain. Did someone feel disrespected? Was this connected to prior violence? Was it part of a broader conflict? Or was it a personal grievance that escalated to an extreme conclusion? Without public confirmation from investigators, those questions remain open. What deepens the tension is the precision of the attack. The shooters did not fire randomly into a crowd. They approached a specific car. They unleashed a concentrated barrage. And then they left. That points to identification. It points to recognition. Someone knew that vehicle. Someone believed they knew who was inside. And yet, more than 50 rounds later, the intended outcome may not have aligned perfectly with the plan. No suspects have been named publicly. No charges have been announced. No clear motive has been presented. For Gabryel's family, that lack of closure compounds the loss. For the community, it reinforces a troubling reality. A brazen daytime ambush can happen, and those responsible can still remain unidentified weeks later. Investigations of this scale take time. Ballistics analysis, witness interviews, digital reviews, tip lines. Each element must be verified before authorities speak definitively. But until that happens, the question continues to hang over this case. Who were they trying to kill? And perhaps just as important, what did they believe justified that level of force? Because 50 rounds is not confusion, it's intent. More than 50 rounds. In the middle of the afternoon, on a city street, a toddler sitting in the back seat. When a shooting reaches that level of intensity, it stops being just about one victim or one suspect. It forces a larger conversation about escalation, about how conflicts evolve, and how far they can go. Because this wasn't a single shot fired in panic. It wasn't a brief exchange between two people arguing face to face. This was sustained gunfire directed at a parked vehicle, carried out in broad daylight in a residential neighborhood. That kind of attack suggests something had built up over time. Whether that buildup involved personal grievances, online exchanges, territorial issues, or something else entirely, the result was the same. In recent years, law enforcement agencies across major cities have acknowledged that disputes increasingly play out on social media before they ever reach the street. Words are posted publicly. Comments are screenshotted. Allegiances are declared. Insults are amplified, and what might once have been a private disagreement becomes a public spectacle. When pride and reputation are involved, escalation can happen quickly. Authorities have not confirmed that an online dispute directly led to this shooting, but investigators have examined digital activity as part of the case. That alone reflects a broader shift in how conflicts are now understood. Online spaces are no longer separate from physical ones. They intersect. And when retaliation becomes part of the culture surrounding conflict, the threshold for violence can drop. If the attackers knew a baby was inside the vehicle, the disregard for life becomes even more disturbing. If they didn't know, it highlights something equally troubling, that the target mattered more to them than any potential collateral damage. Either scenario points to a dangerous normalization, the idea that retaliation overrides restraint. Communities affected by repeated violence often wrestle with this reality. When shootings become familiar, when sirens are routine, and when arrests lag behind incidents, frustration grows. Some begin to see retaliation as inevitable rather than preventable. That mindset is where escalation takes root. It doesn't begin with 50 rounds. It begins with unresolved grievances, with anger left unchecked, with conflicts that are encouraged instead of diffused. And once violence becomes a language people believe will be understood, its scale can expand rapidly. The attack that killed Gabryel Gina Ayres wasn't quiet. It wasn't hidden. It didn't happen under cover of darkness. It happened in full view of the public. That visibility matters. It sends fear beyond the immediate victims. It signals that boldness has replaced caution. And when cases like this remain unsolved for weeks or months, that perception can deepen. Again, investigators have not publicly confirmed the motive behind this shooting. But the pattern of escalation seen in similar cases across the country often follows a familiar path: conflict, amplification, retaliation. The tragedy here is that regardless of motive, the outcome was irreversible. A 26-year-old mother is gone. A child will grow up without her. And a community is left asking why such overwhelming force was used in the first place. In the days that followed February 4th, the crime scene tape came down. But the grief didn't. Family members gathered to remember Gabryel Gina Ayres not as a headline, not as a statistic, but as who she was, a 26-year-old mother whose life ended in seconds. Balloons were released. Candles were lit. Photos were held close. Her name was spoken softly and then loudly. Vigils like these serve two purposes. They mourn the life that was taken, and they demand accountability for how it was taken. Community members expressed anger not just at the shooters, but at the brazenness of the attack. More than 50 rounds fired into a car in the middle of the day. The fact that a 13-month-old child was inside that vehicle made the outrage even sharper. The baby survived physically unharmed. But survival doesn't erase what happened. That child will one day learn how their mother died. They will hear the details. They will see the headlines. And they will grow up knowing that someone made a decision or several decisions that permanently altered their life. The father of the child survived as well, though wounded. His recovery is physical. The emotional weight is something else entirely. As of now, no arrests have been announced publicly. Police have not released suspect names. Investigators have remained measured in what they disclose, stating only that the shooting appears targeted and that the investigation is ongoing. That silence creates space. Space for speculation. Space for frustration. Space for fear. Someone planned this. Multiple individuals carried it out. Vehicles were used. Weapons were obtained. Routes were chosen. And afterward, people dispersed. Crimes of this scale rarely exist in isolation, which brings us back to the unanswered question that has echoed since day one. Who was the intended target? Was it Gabryel? Was it her partner? Was it connected to something that had been building quietly in the background? Law enforcement may know more than they can publicly say. That is often the case in active investigations. But for the community, the absence of visible progress can feel like stagnation. Justice, in situations like this, depends on more than detectives. It depends on witnesses, on people who may have seen a vehicle circling the block, on someone who recognizes a detail from that afternoon, on individuals who may know more than they've said. And that's why cases like this often hinge on one simple truth. Someone knows who pulled those triggers. Prevention, too, begins in small decisions long before violence erupts. It begins with de-escalation, with refusing to let conflict spiral, with recognizing when pride and retaliation are pushing situations toward irreversible outcomes. But prevention is abstract. Justice is concrete. Justice is names, charges, court dates, accountability. Until that happens, a family waits, a child grows, and a neighborhood carries the memory of what 50 rounds sounded like in the middle of the day. Gabryel Gina Ayres should still be here, raising her baby, living her life, moving through ordinary days that now feel precious in hindsight. Instead, her story becomes part of a larger conversation about escalation, retaliation, and the cost of unchecked conflict. The investigation continues. The questions remain. And the responsibility to speak up if you know something still stands. What do you think really happened here? Let me know in the comments. Because somewhere, beyond the silence, beyond the speculation, beyond the grief, someone knows who pulled those triggers. If you made it this far, you understand this isn't just another headline. Share this video so the right eyes see it. Justice moves when attention stays focused. This has been the Dark Trace Crime Stories. Thank you for watching.